There's a moment in life quiet, often unspoken, when you realize you've been waiting for someone to see you, waiting for someone to validate your worth, waiting for a sign that you're enough. That moment is subtle, but it cuts deep. Because what it reveals is this: somewhere along the way, you handed your value to someone else. And Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychoanalyst, would tell you exactly why that hurts so much. He'd say, until you value yourself, no one will. Not because people are cruel, not because the world is broken, but because you are the mirror. And if you see yourself as dim, even the light of others can't reach you. We live in a culture obsessed with approval. We chase likes, followers, applause, and praise. We measure our worth by metrics outside of us. But Jung's insight strikes like lightning through that illusion. He says, no amount of external validation will ever feel like enough if you do not first validate yourself. Because until then, every compliment feels suspicious. Every success feels like luck. Every relationship feels unstable. And that's not because the world is unstable. It's because your center is. You've built your identity on shaky ground. And Jung doesn't just diagnose that problem, he demands that we confront it.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's ask the question that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Why don't you value yourself? Is it because of what someone said to you? A parent? A teacher? A society that taught you to shrink? Is it because of a mistake you made, or a comparison you keep making, or a standard you're never able to meet? Jung would say that all of these answers point to the same place, the unconscious, the hidden world beneath your thoughts, the place where your image of yourself was formed long before you had words to describe it. And if you don't go there, if you don't descend into that inner underworld, you'll always be trying to fix your life from the surface. This is where it gets real. Jung didn't want you to just feel better. He wanted you to become whole. And wholeness requires integration. That means confronting your shadow, the parts of you you've rejected, denied, suppressed. The parts that say, I'm not enough, or I'm unlovable, or I don't belong. And here's the paradox. The more you avoid those parts of you, the more control they have over you. They show up in your relationships, your fears, your people-pleasing, your perfectionism, your silence, your rage. And the only way to break free is to face them. To say, I see you, I hear you, I am not afraid of you. But let's slow down. What does it actually mean to value yourself? It's not just positive thinking. It's not standing in front of a mirror and yelling affirmations. It's deeper. It means recognizing that your worth is not conditional. It's not based on your productivity, your appearance, your achievements, your popularity. It's based on your existence. You are valuable because you are. Because you are a manifestation of consciousness, of life, of the universe experiencing itself. And when you really get that, not just intellectually, but in your bones, you stop begging for scraps of attention. You stop chasing people who don't see you. You stop apologizing for being. Let me ask you something bold. What would your life look like if you stopped negotiating your worth? What if you entered every room not arrogantly, but with quiet certainty that you belong? That your voice matters? That your needs are not inconveniences, but signals of your humanity? That your boundaries are not walls, but invitations to truth? Can you feel how differently that would shape your relationships, your work, your inner dialogue? That's the shift Jung is trying to provoke. Not a surface-level confidence, but a rooted identity. One that cannot be shaken by rejection or failure or judgment. But here's the deeper truth. You can't fake this. You can't trick yourself into valuing yourself. Because the unconscious knows. And until you do the work, until you go inward and meet yourself fully, you'll keep looking outward for what only you can give you. Jung calls this individuation the lifelong process of becoming your true self. Not the self that pleases others, not the self that performs, but the self that is. And that self is waiting, right now, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, and beneath the mask. And it's whispering to you, I've been here all along, just waiting for you to remember. Ask yourself this: where in my life am I still trying to earn love? That question can change everything. Because once you see where you're performing, you can choose to stop. You can choose to show up as you are. And when you do that, when you value yourself not for what you do, but for who you are, something radical happens. The world begins to reflect it back to you. People treat you differently. Opportunities align. Relationships deepen. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You are not here to prove yourself. You are here to be yourself. And until you value that, no one else truly can. The mirror of the world, how others reflect what you believe about yourself. There's a truth so profound, so quietly powerful, that once you see it, you can never unsee it. The way the world treats you often mirrors the way you treat yourself. It's not about blame, it's about reflection. Carl Jung knew this. He called it projection, the idea that what we see in others, what we attract, what we tolerate, and even what we fear, is often a reflection of our own unconscious beliefs. And nowhere is this more true than in how we experience our own value. If you walk through the world believing you're invisible, people will overlook you. If you believe you must earn love through sacrifice, you'll find people who gladly take and never give. If you doubt your voice, others will speak over you. Not because the world is conspiring against you, but because your energy is teaching people how to treat you. That's the mirror. And learning to read that mirror is one of the most life-changing things you can do. Jung would tell you, until you bring the unconscious to consciousness, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. You'll call it bad luck. You'll say, people always treat me this way, or I can never catch a break, or why does no one see me? But the truth is, you don't see you. You're still waiting for someone else to validate what you have not yet fully accepted. And the world can't give you what you're unwilling to give yourself. Let's go deeper. Think of someone in your life who you feel doesn't respect you. Ask yourself, where have I been disrespecting myself in this relationship? Maybe you've been quiet when you needed to speak. Maybe you've overextended yourself, hoping to be liked. Maybe you've allowed boundaries to be crossed because you didn't want to be too much. Now ask, what would change if I valued myself more in this dynamic? Not in a confrontational way, but in a grounded, clear, embodied way. How would your energy shift? Would you speak differently? Stand differently? Would you even stay? This is not about ego. It's not about arrogance. It's about alignment. When you value yourself truly and deeply, you stop entering rooms asking for permission to exist. You start entering rooms with presence. You don't need to dominate. You don't even need to speak loudly, because your being carries weight, and people feel that. Energy doesn't lie. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates through symbols, dreams, and emotion, but it also communicates through relationships. Every person you encounter is showing you something about yourself, your wounds, your projections, your desires, your fears. And if you're awake enough to see the pattern, you can begin to change it. Let me ask you something that might shake you. What if every relationship in your life is a reflection of how you truly see yourself? What if the people you attract, the ones you chase, the ones you tolerate, are all holding a mirror to your unconscious self-image? Would you still keep chasing those who withhold love? Would you still prioritize the people who devalue your time? Would you still diminish your voice to make others comfortable? Or would you pause and begin to rewrite the script from the inside out? Until you value yourself, no one will. Not because people are cruel, but because people respond to the frequency you emit. You can't fake self-worth. You can't manufacture it with a brand or a wardrobe or a clever bio. Because self-worth isn't about what you present, it's about what you embody. And the world feels that in you, long before you speak a word. Jung would say the journey to self-value begins in the shadow, in the places you've rejected. The parts of you you've labeled too sensitive, too much, not enough, unworthy. But those parts are not flaws. They are exiled truths. And they're not trying to ruin your life, they're trying to reunite you with your wholeness. When you make peace with those parts, something extraordinary happens. You stop looking for love in places that hurt. You stop trying to prove your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. And you start creating relationships that reflect your truth, not your trauma. Here's a practice. The next time you feel invisible, disrespected, or dismissed, don't immediately blame the other person. Pause. Go inward. Ask, is this a pattern? And if so, what belief is fueling it? Maybe it's the belief that you have to earn love, or that your worth is tied to productivity, or that being needed is the same as being loved. Whatever it is, bring it into the light. Because once you name the belief, you can change the behavior. You can begin to show up differently. And when you do, the mirror changes. This is the revolution Jung was pointing to, not a revolution out there, but a revolution in here, in the unseen, in the unconscious. Because when you value yourself not in a performative, #worthy way, but in the quiet moments when no one is watching, you begin to attract a different world. Not because you're lucky, but because you're aligned. And alignment is magnetic. So let me ask you again, in a different way, if the world is a mirror, what is it showing you right now? And what would it begin to reflect back to you if you fully, unapologetically valued yourself not as a concept, but as a truth? Because when you start seeing yourself clearly, the world has no choice but to follow. The inner reclamation, becoming the source of the value you seek. There's a moment in every human life, an invisible line in the sand, where you stop searching for someone to save you and start becoming the source of what you've been craving. That's where inner value begins. Not with applause, not with status, but with this quiet, seismic shift. You stop waiting. You stop waiting for someone to finally choose you. You stop waiting for the perfect job, the perfect partner, the perfect moment. You stop waiting for permission to matter. And you realize it's always been you. You are the source. You are the origin. And Carl Jung would say that this realization is not just personal, it's archetypal. It's the awakening of the self. the moment the ego surrenders to something deeper, something wiser, something whole. Let's be honest, we've all been conditioned to believe that value comes from the outside in. Worries from grades, from awards, from followers, or from compliments, from being needed, from being liked. But Jung's legacy shatters that illusion. He tells us, everything you seek already exists inside of you, but you've disowned it. You've projected it outward. You've given your gold to others. And now the journey is not to achieve value, but to reclaim it. To go back into yourself, into the unconscious, and retrieve what you abandoned in order to survive. This is the work of inner reclamation. And it begins by identifying the stories you've internalized about your worth. Maybe you were taught that love is earned, that success defines significance, that humility means self-erasure, that you must constantly prove your goodness to deserve belonging. These are not just thoughts, they are programs, and they run your life until you interrupt them. So here's the question: what story about your worth are you still living out that doesn't belong to you? And whose voice is it really? Your parents? A religion? A culture? A past version of you doing their best to survive? Jung would say that healing begins when we stop identifying with the ego and start listening to the deeper self, the part of us that is whole, eternal, and untouched by external validation. That self doesn't need to be loved to know its value. It is love. That self doesn't need to be perfect to be worthy. It is worthy. And when you reconnect with that self, something remarkable happens. You no longer need the world to reflect your value, you begin to radiate it. And people respond not because you demand their approval, but because you no longer need it. This is not self-esteem. This is not confidence. This is not ego inflation. This is spiritual clarity. You begin to walk into rooms with your full presence, not trying to impress, not trying to shrink, not trying to manage perceptions, just being. And Jung would say that this state is rare because it requires you to face every part of yourself you've tried to hide. It requires you to meet your shadow, not just the parts you've labeled bad, but the parts you've labeled not enough. And when you integrate those parts, you stop leaking your power. You stop outsourcing your worth. You become whole. Let me offer a metaphor. Imagine your inner world as a house. For years, you've been standing at the front door, inviting people in, hoping they'll validate your home. Hoping they'll say, "Wow, this is beautiful," or "You're doing great." But you've never gone into the basement. You've never cleaned out the attic. You've never sat in the living room alone and said, "This is mine, all of it." That's what reclaiming your value looks like. You stop waiting for guests to affirm your house. You start inhabiting it fully. And suddenly it doesn't matter who knocks, because you're home. Now here's where the transformation deepens. When you value yourself, you start setting boundaries not as a defense, but as a declaration. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop explaining your worth. You stop trying to be digestible. And people who are threatened by that will fall away. Let them. Because your job is not to make others comfortable. Your job is to be who you are fully. And the people who are meant to walk with you will rise to meet you at that level of clarity. Jung believed that the process of becoming whole requires the death of the false self. The part of you that was built to please, to perform, to survive. That death is not easy. It feels like loss. It feels like grief. But it is the necessary fire that clears space for the real you to emerge. The you that doesn't chase love. The you that doesn't apologize for taking up space. The you that stands tall not because you're better than anyone, but because you finally remember you were never less. So let me ask you one final soul-deep question. What would your life look like if you truly remembered your value every moment of every day? How would you speak? What would you tolerate? What would you stop doing? What would you start claiming, not with arrogance, but with radiant truth? Because until you value yourself, no one else truly can. But when you do, when you really fully do, the world doesn't just reflect it. The world begins to rise to meet it.